Yeah, so I'd like to thank you guys for being here, and especially thanks to Mark and John for inviting us to be here to talk to you guys about it, because we think it's really important that we speak to you guys about CJAI, which is what we call the Canadian Journal of Arthropod Identification, and especially in its role with citizen science as an outreach tool for you to point people towards, and also as something that your organization can get together and get some extra credibility. So, to start off, about 150 years ago, 160 years ago, George Washington Carver was playing out in the woods when he was a kid, and he'd like to play around with the rocks, the stones, the birds, and especially the insects, but nobody could tell him what it was he was playing with, and it obviously frustrated him. In those 150 years since then, excuse me, I'm still coming out from a cold. Anyways, so in the 150 years since then, naturalists, researchers, and illustrators have done a great job in documenting and making the identifications of the megafauna, the rocks, the flowers, the birds, and the mammals, as well as the other beasts, as he called them, very accessible in the form of field guides. And with the exception of some general guides to insects, to get you to families and such, there haven't been many guides that actually get you to the species level, other than the super megafauna, like the bird or the butterflies, caterpillars, and dragonflies, and some major beetle families. So these are what we like to call the birds of the insect world, because they gather a lot of attention. They have lots of people out looking at them, and so they've got these great guides where you can go and find them quite easily. And you can get this at your library, at your local bookstore. For the remaining several million insects, you can't do this for the most part if you're an amateur. If you're a professional and you have access to a giant collection of insects, you can go through there. You've also got library accounts through your university or government agency, which you can go through, and you can get the primary literature, which obviously has lots of identification guides in it. But this is pretty much cut off from the majority of amateurs, citizen scientists included. This is the traditional method. But as we're going forwards, we're seeing a great increase in the affordability and availability of digital imaging technology, ranging in size from your DSLR for the big fancy photos, but you can also get pretty decent images on your cell phone, as a number of our speakers have noted today, and how they're trying to get images. In fact, if you go to Flickr and you do a simple image search, just for the term insect, you return 1.6 million images that are tagged with the term insect. 350 of these actually have GPS data and are mappable. So what you've got now is you've got 1.6 million insect specimens that are freely available to anybody to go look at. This is just Flickr, never mind Bug Guide and the resource that is. You've got essentially a digital insect collection at your fingertips that you can access anywhere, whether you're a citizen, a scientist, or anybody else. And so now the revolution is changing. The problem with a lot of these resources, Flickr and Bug Guide, are that the level of curation that there is, and thus the availability of that data to researchers and to citizen scientists. So in our mind, there's two different ways that you can facilitate curation of these digital image collections. The first method is generally what's going on in Bug Guide, where you have your researcher or your citizens out in the field taking photographs, collecting specimens, and then uploading them either to Bug Guide or sending them directly to an expert. Now, I use expert loosely here because although we've got Steve Marshall photo here, who's a leading expert, wrote a big book on things, and is a professional taxonomist, in my mind, an expert is somebody who knows this stuff. Doesn't necessarily get paid to know it, but they know their stuff. So it could be the ecologist that knows all of the insects related to tallow. It could be the passionate scientist in their backyard that has developed a personal interest in say, the butterflies of Illinois or the bees of Illinois, as we heard about earlier. So anyway, so the citizen sends the things off, gets it into the hands of the expert in some manner. The expert looks at it, takes their time. Hopefully they get around to it. Sometimes we're busy and we don't. They get the debt, and they hopefully put it back and give it to the original photographer, which isn't always the case, though. Sometimes things get mixed up, the researcher is busy, and so it just ends up in their collection. They use it, but it doesn't necessarily get back to the original person. The other method, the ones that we're really advocating for, is for the researcher to spend his time at the outset and start to create keys or identification aids for different groups. And then to put these keys or identification aids into a central repository. This allows anybody working out in the field to access these, to know where they can go to find these keys. And so if they find something they're interested in while they're out working on a project in their backyard or just out camping or in their house for that matter, they can go online and easily find what that key is, figure out what it is they've found, and find a good species identification relatively easily and for free. The bonus to the researcher after this is now they might get curated images, so the people being more informed about what they're looking at will upload their images with the species name, which Google will then find. They might even send them off to the person who wrote the key saying, hey, look at this, I found this, I saw it in your key and I used it, what do you think? So now you've got access to all sorts of data passively that interested naturalists may put out there, or which may be submitted directly back to the person who wrote the key. So at the Canadian Journal of Arthropod Identification, we have two main objectives dealing with both sides of this equation. We've got the naturalist side, where we want to provide top quality arthropod identification tools freely available to anybody, anywhere. But we also want to make sure that the researchers provide proper credit and have an incentive to publish with our journal, namely through having a peer-reviewed publication. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So here's a couple of examples of how we want to increase the ability of naturalists and those that don't have years of university training or post-university training identifying insects. So we like to use something that we think is really important is using a lot of digital images, a lot of high color, high resolution images. Because we're located online digitally and not having to worry about print publication and the costs associated with color imagery, we can post hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of images per publication. So we have these abilities. So you can use these color coordinating things that are easy to see, but not necessarily easy to translate into text. Like I mentioned, we're dedicated to open access, making sure that all of these identification aids and the relevant biological data associated at the ends of the keys are available to anybody anywhere, which of course means that you can take these keys on your digital or on your cell phone, on your iPad, on your laptop, and take them into the field to the research station with you if you have access. If there's no internet access where you are, you can always download the PDF. That's the other thing we make available, is we make a PDF for all of these keys that are useful for keys. We do take matrix keys, which are pretty much impossible to make a PDF of. But we'll at least put the species data, the generic data, the information at the end available in a PDF so that people can take that with them in the field if they don't have internet access. And like I mentioned, we want to make sure that the researchers, those especially in academia who get paid by their publication essentially, have an incentive to publish with us. And so we have an excellent editorial staff composed of some of the top taxonomists and evolutionary biologists in Canada, as were the Canadian Journal of Arthropod Identification, who go through and review these publications quite speedily and make sure that they get online in time. Also importantly is we've just been accepted as a core journal of the Entomological Society of Canada. So the Entomological Society of Canada is 150 years old, so we've got a lot of resources at our expense now, or at our beck and call. We're able to deal with publications. We have web space. We have the technical editing. That's me for dealing with all of these things and getting them ready to be online and ready to go, as well as the exposure that comes with having a major entomological partner. So the other important thing to note is just because we're the Canadian Journal of Arthropod Identification doesn't mean we only deal with Canadian fauna. If you want to publish a world review of a taxon, that's great. We love it. We actually had one published a couple months ago on world genera of Clusiidae, which are tiny little flies that most people don't really realize are there. But if you want to work on different regions as well, if you wanted to do something about the bees of North America, or perhaps just the ladybugs of America, or even just regionalized areas, so you want to say the upper Mideast, or even just California, you want to do a generic review of Californian insects. All we ask is that at least one taxon somewhere in that revision is known to occur in Canada or is expected to occur in Canada, which isn't very hard. Pretty much every insect family in North America, somehow you can find some correlation that's going to end up in Canada. As well as having a large scope and a good backing, we've tried to make it accessible for as many entomologists and as many people as possible to publish. So we've been working on accepting as many different formats for presenting your key as possible. This is generally my job, getting things to work and play nicely together. But we've worked with things such as just a simple word key, edited, put online with, and then adding the images as secondary images. If you've got some HTML skills, you can make your own websites and publish those. If you're really fancy, you can work with Adobe Flash or HTML5 and make really interactive guides. Or if you're interested in multi-input keys such as Lucid or XID, we'll gladly publish those publications as well. But perhaps the greatest thing that we're trying to push is using PowerPoint to make your keys out of. So you don't need to worry about having any technical skills. Everybody that's at this meeting who's presenting is clearly using PowerPoint. Any students, pretty much any researcher has used PowerPoint. They know how to do it. It's easy to put your images in. So we've made a template for species keys and for the species pages that will hopefully simplify how you can create your own guides and such. And these are all freely available on our Instructions to Authors website online. You can download it and start plugging your images in your text, and then just talk to me and we'll figure out how to get it going. Now, just because we have a template doesn't mean you necessarily have to follow it. All 4 of these pages that were recently published in the Canadian Journal of Arthropod Identification are all developed in PowerPoint. So just because we have a template and it says 1 picture, 1 couplet, whatever, you can do whatever you want. You can customize it just as we've seen all the different slides coming up today. So you can have multiple photos per area. You can have a different layout. You can have even multi-input if you wanted to. With the student is working on the fireflies of North America. And so to easily get through the genera, they're recognizable by habitus. He just threw a sample of each genus up there, allowing you to jump in right away without having to deal with detailed morphology. And again, you can lay out your specimen pages in a way that includes as much data as you have possible with links to different images and such. I mentioned a student did the firefly thing, and I just want to bring this up now, is that the Canadian Journal of Arthropod Identification, a lot of our papers are actually student papers, so either 4th-year projects that have expanded a little bit, not underpaid, but very low-funded summer internships, or in the case of the abandoned papers that we've had by Anthony Thomas, he's not funded at all. He's pretty much a non-funded scientist, and he's published 2 papers with us. So we're not just looking at the funded entomologists at big institutions. We're welcoming publications from pretty much anybody, anywhere. And especially the student papers. We've had, I think, almost at least half of our papers now are essentially 4th-year theses, 4th-year grad or undergrad theses that have been polished up a little bit and have been submitted and published with our journal. So how does CJAI and Bug Guide get together? We get together great. Most of the time, whenever a new publication goes up on CJAI, it's very shortly accepted by the Bug Guide community, in this case, well-reviewed. But many times, we'll go through and we'll see links to CJAI coming from Bug Guide as people are using it to identify images within Bug Guide. How about CJAI and possible citizen science projects? When I was getting ready for this talk, I looked through some of the different talks and some of the different citizen science projects that were here today and some of that aren't. And I noticed that bee spotter, I mean, we're perfectly set up. We've got a paper published a couple years ago on the bee genera of Eastern Canada, which works pretty well with the bee spotter, as well as we recently this summer had a firefly paper, which could be of use to the Firefly Watch, which is a citizen science project out of Boston. We've also got a number of publications coming up that may be of interest to other citizen science projects. More pollinator work, including the Megachile and Duphoria of Canada, as well as a giant flower fly genera paper, which is going to be coming out soon. As well as you can see a long list of other papers that we're expecting to be submitted or published in the next 6 months. We've been in contact with the authors and are knowing what's going on. So you might see there's a broad range of not only the arthropods that we're publishing on, but also the ranges and how these things are working. I just want to point out one for those people that are thinking that this is only a taxonomist game. What we've got here is the Common Nursery and Landscape Pests of Ontario. This is somebody's graduate project that they're publishing with us soon. And instead of being a single family working down through, it's actually working on all of the pests, the common pests. Like I think he's got 180, 200 pests that he's working with. And so they're across a variety of different orders, a variety of different families. And he's working through and making a published key for that so that it works for that group of people. So if you're an ecologist and you work on a prairie habitat, you can come up with common insects of your prairie habitat. If you're a medical entomologist, you can come up with the common insects in your household or those that bite, sting, things like that. We're not just restricted to the traditional sense of you start a taxon family and you do your key for that. If you want to publish a more ecological or division outside, irrespective of taxonomy, we fully welcome you to do so. So I asked you guys, who all have some sort of identification key on your websites and such, why not considering publishing in CJAI? With a little extra work, a couple extra species and whatnot, you can make new guides and new identifications. And especially what we're looking for is the inclusion of new species, new geographical records, or perhaps new host and parasite records. Anything that has to do with natural history, which can facilitate somebody identifying a specimen, we'd love to have it. We also have the ability to publish new species. We follow the ICZN regulations. We do send out public or printed copies to several institutions, and until the ICZN kind of gets with the future and stops having to do that, we'll continue to do so. So if you do have new species that you wanted to describe in your keys, we welcome them, and you're available to do so. So it's also a great place if you've got new state, county records for your individuals. We encourage you to publish them with us. So I'd just like to thank our outgoing technical editor, Dave Chung. He's left big shoes for me to fill, as well as our Biological Survey of Canada and the Entomological Society of Canada for helping with funding and logistics, as well as our editorial board, John and Mark, for bringing us here today to talk to all of you, as well as any of our past, present, and future contributors, because our journal is only as strong as those who put their information into it. So, thank you.